If Notre Dame is going to make a run in the college football playoff this season, they're going to need an elite offense to do it. My biggest questions about each position group on that side of the ball coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Wednesday, May 22nd, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports. As always, you can watch the show on YouTube, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along, please like the video below and subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the pod, please take a moment to rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe there as well. As for today, I'm going to break down each position group on the offense side of the ball and share the most pressing question that I have about each one as we head into the summer months here. I'll do the same exercise for the defense on a later episode, but I'm probably going to save that for next week because we've got some recruiting stuff to talk about on Thursday. I know that Notre Dame recently signed a 3-star defensive lineman, and fans are quite upset about the defensive line class in 2025. So I'm going to talk about all of that tomorrow, and then on Friday, I'm doing another mailbag. So get your questions in. You can jot them in the comments if you're watching along on YouTube, or you can send them to me on social media. The Twitter account is @LockedOnIrish, or you can DM the show on Instagram @LockedOnIrishPod. All right, now let's get to the most important position on the entire team and the biggest question I have about the quarterbacks in 2024. Can Riley Leonard be better than the rest? And I'm not talking about the rest of the guys on the depth chart, because if you look at Notre Dame's depth chart at the quarterback position, it's better than it's been in a really long time. Yeah, it's a pretty low bar. I know that, but we still have to acknowledge it and celebrate it because Notre Dame's got a good room. They've got Riley Leonard, the projected starter, the transfer from Duke. They also have Steve Angeli, who's entering his 3rd season with the program, has some starting experience under his belt, really quality backup option. And then you've got the young guns, Kenny Minchey and CJ Carr, to round out the room. And there's plenty of potential with those young guys, but all eyes are going to be Riley Leonard for this season. It's funny because if you think back to this time last year, when Notre Dame added Sam Hartman from Wake Forest, he felt like the savior. Notre Dame paid a lot of money to get him. He had a ton of experience, ton of accolades, and most of all, Sam Hartman was a major improvement from the guys that we had the season prior. That's why when I see some of the Sam Hartman criticism and say that we all got a little overboard in the offseason leading up to last season, I'll admit that the expectations were clearly too high based on what Sam Hartman ended up doing. But when you think about the reason why people were so excited, it's because they all had to endure the 2022 season and what Notre Dame put out on the field at the quarterback position in Tyler Buchner and Drew Pine. We were desperate, man. So, of course, we were going to get excited about Sam Hartman. It didn't turn out as we all had hoped, but still, it was an upgrade. Now, this year, Notre Dame went out and they got another big-name transfer out of the ACC. They paid a lot of money to get him, but the vibe around Riley Leonard is so much different than it was with Sam Hartman. Nobody is really looking at Riley Leonard as the savior. There is certainly a lot more skepticism about Riley Leonard from the fan base, myself included, and I think it's fair. I think that, now that this is the 3rd transfer that Notre Dame has had to go out and get, the first one was getONE, then it was Sam Hartman, and now it's Riley Leonard. It wasn't that the getONE experience and the Sam Hartman experience hurt the team. It just wasn't enough to get Notre Dame to the college football playoff and make a serious run. But Riley Leonard is projected to go much higher in the NFL draft than Sam Hartman or getONE. I've seen him, as high as 2nd round on some mock drafts. I know Nate Trice, I believe his name, is super high on Riley Leonard as a pro prospect. And that has never really made a ton of sense to me, but hey, if he puts it all together this year, then he's certainly going to go really high on the draft boards because he has all the tools you want. And that's why I've said before that I believe that Riley Leonard has the highest ceiling of any Notre Dame quarterback in a really long time when you consider his size, his athletic ability, and his arm strength as well. So I think that he's got a lot of things going for him. Plus, Riley Leonard's game and what he's best at is more suited to the modern game of college football, and more specifically, the offense that Notre Dame's offensive coordinator, Mike Denbrock, wants to run. Because Riley Leonard can run the ball. He's a really, really good runner. He's a great athlete. That might be his best attribute, but he can also throw the ball downfield. And even though accuracy has been a concern at times, there's video evidence. You can look at the film and see him fit some balls into some really tight windows and make some throws that require you to anticipate and lead the receiver and throw the wide receiver open. He's proven he can do it. Can he do it on a consistent basis? That remains to be seen. But if Riley Leonard is able to put it all together, he could have a truly unbelievable season, and he would end up being much better than Sam Hartman, Jack Cohn, or even Ian Book. So when you compare Riley Leonard's numbers in 2022 to some of the other Notre Dame quarterbacks, he's proven that he can be a really capable guy and that he can really light up the stat sheet, and I think he should be able to put up better numbers this season than he did in 2022 because he's got more talent around him. Notre Dame has really good running backs. There's a ton of depth at wide receiver. They've got a good tight end in Mitchell Evans. And even though the offensive line has some concerns, they also have a much better offensive coordinator in Mike Denbrock, who wants to run a scheme that is best suited to Riley Leonard's skill set. Denbrock likes to run the ball with his quarterback. We saw that with Sean Kaiser back in 2015. We saw that recently with Jane Daniels and even Desmond Ridder when Denbrock was at Cincinnati. Plus, Notre Dame has a pretty favorable schedule. So if Riley Leonard does that and he outperforms all the other QBs that Notre Dame has had in recent years, then this team really does have a chance at achieving something special. All right, now let's look at the running backs. I think the question here is pretty clear. Who's the alpha? Because Notre Dame has 5 guys in the room right now that all bring different things to the table, but really it's going to come down to Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Last year was both of their first years getting significant action, even though it was Jadarian Price's second year with the program. He missed his entire freshman season due to an injury. So Jeremiah Love got the ball a little bit more. He finished with 71 carries, 385 yards, and a touchdown. He also added 8 receptions for 77 receiving yards and another touchdown. Jadarian Price didn't have as many carries. He had 47 carries for 272 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns. He also added a touchdown as a receiving threat as well, although I think both of their receiving touchdowns came against Tennessee State, so I don't really put a ton of stock into that. But when they were the lead backs in the bowl game against Oregon State, they both looked really good. Jeremiah Love was the starter, but it was actually Jadarian Price who ended up eclipsing the 100-yard rushing mark. So both these guys are going to contribute a ton this season. They bring different things to the table. Jeremiah Love is more of a receiving threat. Jadarian Price is probably more of your traditional running back, just given his stature, his ability to run in between the tackles. Although, I will say that even though there was some concern about Jeremiah Love's ability to run in between the tackles once he got to the college level, he is really impressed in that regard. I think back to what he did in the Ohio State game. That guy was hitting the hole at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you think about Jeremiah Love is more of like a big play speed threat on the outside. That guy was running through contact, and you started to see that a little bit in spring practice when he ran over Adon Schuler in the Jersey scrimmage. So they're both capable of doing it. But I think that there's going to be points, especially late in games, when you need one of these guys to make a play and get a first down, and they're probably going to have to run through some contact in order to do it. Who are you going to give the ball to in big third and short situations or just big drives late in the game when you absolutely need a first down? Last year was Wojciak Estimate for obvious reasons, except for the Ohio State game when we all of a sudden decided to take him off the field. We're going to move past that. I don't think it's going to be the same situation this year. You need a guy who's going to be able to pick up first downs, even when it comes down to running into loaded box or situations that aren't super advantageous for the ball carrier. You need an alpha. And I think it's going to be Jadarian Price. I have a lot of confidence in him. I think that we're going to see the type of player that was talked about a couple years ago before Jadarian Price got hurt, when there were whispers that, hey, Jadarian Price might actually be more talented than Wojciak Estimate and Logan Diggs. Then he got hurt, and then he needed last season to recover. This year, he should be going into it fully healthy, and I think that he is poised to have an absolute breakout year. But it's going to come down to who the coaching staff trusts the most in these moments, and that trust is going to have to be earned. It's going to have to be earned in the summer, in workouts. It's going to have to be earned in fall camp, getting ready for the season, and then obviously in real live game situations on Saturday. These two guys are both going to have incredible seasons for Notre Dame this year. They're going to put up a bunch of stats, score a bunch of touchdowns, but I'm really interested to see, when it comes down to crunch time, who is the alpha and who is going to be the lead back for this unit. Because it's great to have a 5-headed monster or a 2-headed monster. At the end of the game, you need one guy, you need one alpha. And I think it's going to be Jadarian Price, but we're going to have to wait and see. All right, coming up next, Notre Dame might lack an elite receiving threat at wide receiver and tight end right now, but is there enough depth to make up for it? Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, now that we've talked about the guys throwing the ball and the guys running the ball, let's talk about the guys who are going to be catching passes this season, and let's start with the wide receivers. So the biggest question that I have about the wide receiver unit heading into 2024 is, can the whole be greater than the sum of its parts? Notre Dame has a much deeper room than they've had in years. And again, like the quarterback position, it's a pretty low bar, but I really, really like the amount of options that Notre Dame has in the wide receiver room right now. And if you were to try to predict the starting unit, the three starting wide receivers that Notre Dame is going to roll out there, I think you could throw out a bunch of different combinations, and a lot of them would make sense. So right now, if you look at the field receiver spot, I think it's going to be Chris Mitchell, the transfer from Florida International. But you also have guys like Jane Greathouse, who is probably best suited to play slot. But Greathouse is also going to have to rotate with Jordan Faison and Jaden Harrison as well at the slot position. And Jaden Greathouse is not going to be a guy you want to take off the field that often. So you can move him to the field receiver where there doesn't seem to be as many backup options unless they play Micah Gilbert at the field spot instead of the boundary. At boundary, it could be Bo Collins, the transfer from Clemson. It could be Jane Thomas, although Jane Thomas might be a little bit more suited for the slot. He's played there before. Then you've got Deion Colsey, who is almost forgotten about just because he's been around for a really long time and he dealt with injuries last season and his career has been pretty up and down. But he actually did start, or he didn't start, but he played some serious minutes as a true freshman. So maybe he steps it up this year. But my point is, there's a bunch of different ways you can move these guys around. But as of now, there isn't one guy who is truly elite. There is not a guy in this room that defenses have to game plan around, a guy who's going to go out there and make a play in a big moment no matter who is guarding him. And I think you need that in college football to win at the highest level. If you look at Michigan, they didn't have a great receiving core, but man, did Roman Wilson seem to show up every single time they needed him, especially in that Alabama game in the college football playoff semifinal. He made some really big plays when Michigan needed them. And then you look at who Michigan played in the national championship. Washington had a ton of great wide receivers. Texas had a bunch of great wide receivers as well, a couple first-round picks. So you really need elite wide receiver play in order to win in the college football playoff. Right now, Notre Dame doesn't have that elite guy, but they have a bunch of guys who can do a bunch of different things for you. But they're going to need all of them to sort of come together and provide elite production without that one elite receiver. That's difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. So the guys I'm most high on in the wide receiver room are Jane Greathouse, Jane Thomas, Chris Mitchell, and Jordan Faison. Jane Greathouse is very consistent. We knew that when he was coming out of high school. He set records in Texas for receiving yards, touchdowns, all kinds of things. So it wasn't really a shock that he came into Notre Dame and made an impact as a true freshman. He was actually tied for the team lead in receiving touchdowns his freshman season, despite the fact that he missed several games due to a hamstring injury. He has the best chance of being a true wide receiver number one in this group, but he's also probably going to lead the team in receptions. And I think that on key third down situations, if the ball isn't going to a tight end, it's probably going to Jane Greathouse. So I feel really good about him. I also really like Jane Thomas. And I know that sort of people's perception of Jaden Thomas might have taken a hit after last season, but he really just couldn't stay on the field and he couldn't stay healthy. But then in that bowl game, and when he looked fully healthy again, he was making plays, and he is who Steve Angeli trusted the most, at least in critical situations. Jordan Faison obviously had a huge game there as well. That's another guy I'm super high on. I think that Jordan Faison is the best with the ball in his hands. He's the guy who can take a bubble screen and take it to the house. It's not quite Will Fuller level when they used to run those tunnel screens to him, but I do expect that play to be back in the playbook because Mike Denbrock was the one calling it way back in 2015. Now he's going to be calling it again. I just think that when Jordan Faison has the ball in his hands, he's so quick, he's so shifty and so elusive that he can make a play out of pretty much anything. And then you've got Chris Mitchell, who is a deep threat. That's why Notre Dame went and got him out of FIU in the transfer portal. Marcus Freeman even said as much after the spring game when Chris Mitchell scored the game-winning touchdown. Now, granted, he did score that on a walk-on who fell down mid-play, but still, that's what you want to see from a guy that you went out and you got in the portal, and that is what he is best at doing. He put up really good numbers at Florida International, and whenever you add a guy from a program like that, there's always going to be some concerns about how is his game able to translate to the next level, or in this case, the same level in college football, but just better competition. And based on the reports from spring practice, it sounds like Chris Mitchell has proven that he's going to be able to do that. So if these guys can be elite at what they're asked to do, the unit as a whole can become a strength in a way that it hasn't been in a really long time. And there's other options as well. There's guys like Bo Collins, who we haven't really seen yet in a Notre Dame uniform, who could be a big-time contributor this year. There's Micah Gilbert, the true freshman, who's probably going to force his way onto the field because he's just been that good so far in spring practice, and I expect he's going to continue on that trajectory throughout the summer into fall camp. So you got guys with elite traits. You've got really talented players around them. If they could all come together and put it together, Notre Dame could have elite production despite the fact that they might not have one truly elite wideout. All right, let's look at tight ends. My biggest question here is the next great Notre Dame tight end in this room. I could have just said, can these guys stay healthy? And that probably would have been a perfectly acceptable question for this unit, and given all the injury history that these guys have suffered, but that's a cop-out. That's not what you come here for. So for me, and when I think about who's going to be the next great Notre Dame tight end, I think Mitchell Evans is really good. I thought he was extremely reliable last season. At times, he felt like the only reliable receiving threat for Sam Hartman, but I don't think that Mitchell Evans is quite at the level of some of the great tight ends that have come through Notre Dame in recent years. Again, still very high in him, but I'm talking about like the elite of the elite. He's not the next Michael Mayer. He's not the next Tyler Eifert or Kyle Rudolph. I think the player who has the best chance at accomplishing that is Eli Raridon. Raridon, 6'7". He's 252 pounds, and he has great speed for his size. He's a matchup nightmare for defenses. If a linebacker gets lined up on him, he's going to be too small and too slow. And if it's a cornerback, or really any defensive back for that matter, they're going to be way too small to make a play, especially if it's a jump ball when Eli Raridon can go up and get it. So I understand that Eli Raridon isn't quite the blocker that Mitchell Evans is, but if he's healthy, Eli Raridon could become a real problem for opposing defenses, especially when Mitchell Evans is on the field alongside him. Because I know that with Mike Denbrock, Notre Dame is going to run a lot more 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 running back. But if Evans is healthy and Raridon is healthy, Notre Dame goes out there in 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. The defense is going to have to adjust. They're probably going to stack the box, but Notre Dame is going to be able to throw out of that formation just 2 really talented receiving threats in Eli Raridon and Mitchell Evans. So if Eli Raridon can truly take that next step and he can start showing signs of all the potential we heard about when he was coming out of high school and he's a high 4-star recruit, then the offense could really go to the next level, especially in the red zone, because he's such a big body. He could make a ton of plays in the red zone. Hell, he was the first player to score a touchdown in the blue and gold game. It was a receiving touchdown right there. Even though he bobbled it, made the play look a little bit more difficult, I thought it was telling that the play was designed to go to him when Notre Dame needed a touchdown in the red zone. So even though there's concerns about the injuries with the room, I still think there's a ton of talent there. There's also Cooper Flanagan, who's going to be entering his second year with the program. He's got great potential. Kevin Bauman's recovering from injury. David Sherwood, good H-back. Jack Larson is a promising true freshman, but I expect him to redshirt this year. So Notre Dame has had a ton of great tight ends come through the program. Mitchell Evans is a really good tight end, and honestly, there's a good chance that Mitchell Evans gets drafted after this year. But the best Notre Dame offenses in recent years have always had that truly great tight end, and I think if Eli Raridon is able to stay healthy and take his game to the next level, he could be that, and that could change everything for the Notre Dame offense. Okay, coming up in segment 3, my thoughts in a position group that has plenty of questions, but maybe, just maybe, one key answer. Find out right after this. Okay, last but not least, we've got the offensive line, and I think if we're all being honest here, there's probably a bunch of different questions we could ask about the offensive line and what they project to do in this upcoming season. But I think the biggest question that applies to every single person, every single player in this room, can inexperience be fixed with coaching? Joe Rudolph, the Notre Dame offensive line coach, has an extremely difficult task on his hands with this unit. And it's not his fault either. This is only his second year with the program, and Notre Dame lost 2 starting tackles after their junior year. That literally never happens, and that's not the way that you plan things out when you're recruiting guys. It's rare for offensive linemen to leave after their 4th year in their program. A lot of times they get redshirted their first year, and then they end up playing 5 years of the program, unless they're really good, and then they just leave after the senior year. Just think about Mike McGlinchey. Or actually, no, he actually stayed for his 5th year. Think about Quentin Nelson. He's a good example. Redshirted his freshman year, but then still stayed 4 years with the program. If you look at Notre Dame's projected starting offensive line, the unit that we saw go out there with the ones throughout spring practice, this is how many starts they have. At left tackle, Charles Jagasaw has 1 in the bowl game against an Oregon State defense that was extremely depleted due to guys leaving for the portal or just opting out because they declared for the NFL draft. 1 start at left tackle. Left guard, Pat Coogan, he started every game last season, so he has 13 starts. Ashton Craig at center, he has 3 starts. Projected starting right guard, Billy Trouth, he also has 3 starts. Tosh Baker, he has 3 starts, 1 last season, and he had 2 way back in 2021. So that is the starting 5. They have a combined 23 starts among the 5 projected starters. Now, there's also Rocco Spindler, who is competing for the starting guard spot. I would assume that's at the left guard position because it seems like Billy Trouth has right guard all but locked up. So if he gets in, that's even less starts if he ends up starting over Pat Coogan, because Rocco Spindler got 10 starts last season before he suffered a season-ending injury. And then there's Emil Wagner, who's also in the mix to start at right tackle. I actually think that eventually Emil Wagner is going to beat out Tosh Baker for that right tackle spot. Well, Emil Wagner hasn't started a single game in his college career. So there is not much experience at a position group where experience is absolutely vital, especially as a unit. Notre Dame doesn't have that. They have talent. Don't get me wrong. Charles Jagasaw was a 5-star recruit. Pat Coogan and Ashton Craig have exceeded expectations. Billy Trouth was a prize recruit out of high school. He could be a future NFL guy as well. So it's not like they don't have talent in this room, but that talent usually takes longer to develop on the offensive line, and these guys just haven't had enough time to develop before they were thrust into their starting roles, and that has to do with guys leaving for the NFL and things like that. But that doesn't mean they can't step up and make big plays. I mean, Quentin Nelson redshirted his first year, but then he came in and then started dominating very early in his career. So there's talent, and there's reason to believe that this group can figure out, but it's on Joe Rudolph. It's also on Mike Denbrock and Marcus Freeman to make sure that this group is put into the most advantageous situations possible. What actually eases some of my concerns about the offensive line is the fact that Notre Dame has Mike Denbrock, an experienced offensive coordinator who knows how to utilize all of his unit strengths and hide their weaknesses as much as possible. I mean, that's pretty much the name of the game in coaching. How do you put your guys in spots where they can do what they're best at, and how can you hide them from doing things where they're not as great at and the other team is going to try to exploit? So there's ways that Mike Denbrock can fit his scheme to the personnel, and I think that is going to be huge with this unit. This is also where having a running quarterback comes into play as well, because if Riley Leonard gets pressured, he can take off and make plays with his legs, even if the original play design got busted. So there's reasons to believe that even if the offensive line struggles a little bit, the offense can still make things work because they've got a running quarterback and they have an offensive coordinator who knows how to set up the offense in a way that an inexperienced and, frankly, developing unit can sort of figure out things on the fly. We saw it a little bit 2021 when Notre Dame switched to a fast-paced, short passing game after the offensive line in 2021 really struggled throughout much of the year. I think that we could see that early on with the Notre Dame offense, a lot of shotgun, a lot of up-tempo, quick plays where Riley Leonard just gets the ball, turns, has a quick read, and makes the play. It's honestly what Oregon did a lot last year with Bo Nix. He had the highest completion percentage of any college quarterback ever, but most of the time, if you calculated his time to release, it was one of the lowest in college football. And look, it worked. Oregon didn't have an elite offensive line, but they still had a highly productive offense because they were constantly, boom, getting the snap, getting the ball out, taking easy yards when you get them. And then when you got the defense playing on their heels a little bit, then you can run the ball into light boxes. So there's plenty of reasons to think that this Notre Dame offense can work fine, even if the offensive line struggles a little bit, especially at the beginning of the season. But it's going to be on the coaches to make sure that they're able to do so. I know that Joe Rudolph is only in his second year with the program, but he's proven at Wisconsin that he can get his guys ready to play. And even if, they're not quite at the, CFP caliber that you would hope, you can still get the most out of them. And that is going to be absolutely crucial for this Notre Dame offense, because if you have a bad offensive line and you just can't stop anyone, then it really doesn't matter who you have at the skill positions. If guys are coming through right up the middle and they're harassing the quarterback and they're tackling the running back 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, that offense ain't doing anything. I don't care if you have, actually I was going to say Reggie Bush, but he probably could get out of that. But you get my point, right? And I have a feeling that with Joe Rudolph, Mike Denbrock, and even Dylan McCullough working hand in hand in this as well, because he has a big say in the run game. With these coaches who we all admit are really, really great, the Notre Dame coaching staff as a whole is better than it's been in a really long time. I think that if they're able to make up for some of the lack of experience on this unit specifically, the team and specifically the offense is going to be in much, much better shape. So it's going to be a big challenge for Joe Rudolph, but this is the kind of thing that separates the good coaches from the great ones. And if Joe Rudolph is able to get this offensive line to work and they go to the college football playoff and they're able to run the ball and Riley Leonard has time, that would be one hell of a coaching job and one hell of a bullet on Joe Rudolph's resume. It's going to be really exciting to see, because I know I've been critical a lot about the offensive line so far, but I don't want to sound like I'm completely pessimistic, and I think that there's no chance for this group to succeed this year. I think there's a shot. We're just going to have to see how it plays out. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be back tomorrow to talk some recruiting. Like I said at the top, Notre Dame added a 3-star defensive line commit, and message boards are going crazy about defensive line recruiting. So I've got some thoughts on that. I think I'm going to have Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider, on as well to talk through the entire situation. So you're going to want to tune in tomorrow morning. In the meantime, though, make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and also give us a follow on social media. The X account is at Locked On Irish. Instagram is at Locked On Irish Pod. Also, get your mailbag questions in the YouTube comments, or you can send them in on social media. Also, you can give my personal X account a follow at Tyler, WOJCIAK. See you guys tomorrow.